Good evening, welcome to Rehab Talk Radio. I'm your host, Kovaj. I've got an interesting guest with me today. First, before we introduce him, crazy news, we're going to be having a podcast tomorrow. I don't know if it's going to be live or not. That is not the decision being made. The decision being made right now is that we're going to be trying from scratch. If we had zero help, zero anybody, I've got a few guys on the line. We're all going to be sitting down tomorrow and discussing and trying to figure out live how to get into rehab, like in real time. So I think that'd be helpful to a lot of people. I gotta tell you, I tried this morning and I had a heck of a time trying to get into rehab on a Saturday morning, and I'm already in here without the information needed. So hopefully we can get the tools to anybody out there that needs that, so to help them get into a place that they need to be. Moving on to the house. Today my guest is a tenured, definitely a seasoned member of the house. He's been here 2 months longer than I am. He's a senior member. He's dabbled and probably been in every type of committee, program, any aspect you can imagine. He was the head of the cleanup committee. He's definitely been a huge part of this house. Anybody that's been here any length of time definitely knows who he is. Dave, how are you today, buddy? It's good to see you. So you're I know that you've been here about a month and a half longer than me.
Yeah.
So we'll have been overall 1 year come.
March 17th will be my full year.
So it'll be next month
Yeah.
is when you sell it. Now is that your full year of sobriety, or have you been?
Yes, it's also my sobriety date. So I celebrated 11 months yesterday. We celebrated 11 months together yesterday.
Congratulations. Absolutely, good job. I know that you also have been, like I said, part of the cleanup committee, head of the cleanup committee. You've been involved in other committees here.
I ran the donation committee for a while. I'm still part of that. I try to stay as involved in the house as I can. We were just discussing this before we came on. As we advance to where we are in the program, you and I together, is that our involvement in the house becomes a little bit less, because in my mind, when you first get here, that's when you immerse into it, right? But as you progress within the program, you have to start adulting, and when you start adulting, the program becomes a little bit less than, if that makes sense.
It kind of does. It's a transition period. What it meant for me was when you're transitioning bird away from the nest.
Correct. Yeah. And that's the real interesting part for me is that, so I listen to the newer guys in the house, and I hear them a lot going, man, I hate being a Black Lantern. I hate sitting on the couch. And there's times now when I wish I could go back to being a Black Lantern and just sit on the couch for a while and just go like this, instead of having to, because that's part of the challenge in addiction, right? Is when we're addicted, we kind of run on our own schedules. We kind of do our own thing. Nobody tells us where to go or how to do it. We just do it. And so now that we're in recovery, it becomes a part where we have to be responsible again, and we have to actually meet schedules and be places and do things. And that's a challenge when you haven't done it for so long. I mean, I spent 20 plus years of my life in active addiction. So to not be in active addiction and to have to be responsible for where I have to be to other people, it's a challenge. It's a new challenge.
It absolutely is, and I like how you said that we wish we could go back. I remember being induction. I was talking about this with the night head. You know who she is. Her and her daughter both are here, and she was talking about how important it is to be in that 30-day, and how a lot of people are almost skipping it over by leaving the house and finding reasons to almost loopholing getting out of the house. And it is super important. It's how I started podcasting. We were discussing that earlier. Is that I was watching a Denzel Washington motivational, and I had come across, a podcaster, and said, "Yep, I want to try that out." And here and had I not had that induction time, that time of complete lockdown where you're bored off your ass, don't know what to do, and I would have never opened my mind up in that way. That's why I think open-mindedness is probably in the beginning the most crucial.
I would agree with that, and I think it becomes even more crucial moving forward because being open-minded to remaining in recovery. And see, that's the other part for me that is interesting, especially within the house as you watch it. And I have to question sometimes who's actually in this for the recovery and who's just in this to be here. And maybe I'm out overstepping bounds, but I mean, there's things that I see sometimes, and I'm like, are you just here for a place to crash? Are you here to participate in your recovery? Because I tell people all the time, I've got 11 months clean and sober today, but I've got 10 months actually participating in my recovery. So it took me that first 30 days to actually decide that, okay, I'm staying here. I'm doing this. And that's one thing I would say to anybody out there that's on the fence about getting into recovery or doing this, is that
We'll get back to that. We'll rewind the
Okay.
clock. I'll stop you there. We'll rewind the clocks here,
Okay.
just to get a basic feel
No
of who Dave is. We will circle around back
I
to
got
that.
you.
I promise. Just to wind the clocks back, let's get to know Dave for Dave here in the beginning.
I'm almost 50 years old, and I did my first line of dope when I was 22 years old.
Where's it that you came from?
I was originally born. I was really born in Northern California. I grew up most of my life in Washington State. Like I said, I did my first line of dope when I was about 22, 23 years old, and I got busted once, and I quit cold turkey for 20 years, and I didn't do dope until I was about 40. And once I picked it up at 40, I never let it go.
So you picked it up at 40, and so you're.
I'm almost 50 now. I'm 48.
So we're talking about 8 years.
8 years of just straight doing it. You know what I mean? And so I don't know how to explain that. It's just like I lost everything. I let everything go. Everything in my life went away. I'll take you to the particular incident. February 20th, 2016. I was high, drunk, pretty much just screwed off from the floor up, and I got hit by a car across. I was running across the freeway, and I got hit by a car on I-5.
You got hit by a car.
I got hit by a car, and
Fast was this car going?
it was going 55 miles an hour.
Jesus.
So here's the cool part though. Never for the grace of God, I got hit and it picked me up from my left knee down, and that was it. Tore my ACL, MCL, fractured my tib fib, and I had compartmental syndrome. And that was the only injuries I suffered. However, I spent.
May I ask what mental syndrome is?
Compartmental syndrome.
Thank you.
It is a syndrome where, so if I could show you in my left leg, it fucking expanded to like this size.
Holy cow.
And so you can see it from here, but they had to do like a small incision, and it blew up to this.
It looks like an alien got a hold of
Pretty
your
much.
leg.
You should have seen it. You should have seen it when it first came, when the bandages first came off. That was the fun one.
Toledo. So they had to rip your leg basically apart.
Yeah, basically.
Did they have to do skin grafting?
Yeah, that's what this is. This is skin graft.
Oh, okay.
And so anyway, I spent a month in the hospital over that. And here's the interesting part behind that is, okay, so when I was in the hospital, this was in Tacoma, Washington, and they wanted me to go to a physical rehab for up to 90 days before I was released actually from the hospital. However, because of the situation, and when I arrived to the hospital, I was high, drunk, everything else, and so I was deemed an alcoholic, an addict, all of those things by the medical community. So no physical rehab would accept me, because why are we going to accept him? He's already off, So they wouldn't accept me. So I was just released.
So no physical therapy, no
Well,
additional
I
help.
was able to get physical therapy after that, but I wasn't able to go to a residential facility. I had to find someplace to go. And so some friends of mine took me in for a while, and I stayed with them for about a year during that period. And that was a period that I struggled a little bit, but I got through it. But when I left that place and was back on my own, was when my addiction took over again. And
Right.
it kept on going. And I traveled across 3 states before I finally landed here. I left Washington, went to Oregon for a while, and Oregon I was completely off doing dope like every day, all day. That's all I ever did. And then one day I got on a plane and flew to Reno.
Now, when you did it, A, I'm curious what got you into it, and B, what was your delivery method of it? Was it insufflated, snorted, injected?
I was snorting it. That's all I ever did was snorted it. I never smoked it, never injected it. Snorted it. It's the only way to fly.
Had you tried smoking it any
No.
other way?
Nope.
Nope. Just you said
Nope.
one way, and that was it.
It was so my justification for that was, look, I knew what I was doing. I knew how it affected me, and I didn't want to find out how shooting up affected me. I didn't want to find any of those things out. So I was comfortable with what I was doing, and so I left it alone. If nothing else, I have always been throughout my life a creature of habit and routine. And if I know how something works, then that's the only way I'm going to do it.
If it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Correct.
That's the motto. So what started you into it? Was it just introduced to you?
Well, like I said, when I first tried it, I was in my 20s, and it was just there, and so boom. What got me back into it later in life was I worked in the restaurant industry for many years, and it's drug addiction and alcoholism was very prevalent in that industry, and so it was just there. I was a stone cold drunk the whole time I was working. I get out of work and drink You know, I was paying $1,000 bar tabs every week just to get by. But my mom was living with me at the time. I was supporting my habit, her habit, and every other habit. And at that point, where I was taking pills, oxys, and things of that sort. And when it got to the point of those were just too expensive, and so a buddy of mine says, "Here, you need some dough," and I just got some dough, and then I just never stopped. You know.
Okay, so you loved it from the second you got it. You hit the ground running.
Right, and see, so like for instance, I was just saying this in a meeting the other night. Is that they say in our readings that in the 12-step reading that we didn't become addicted in one day. I call bullshit. I became addicted the minute I touched it. The minute I put a line on my nose, I was done. It was over. Okay, give me more.
Absolutely understandable.
And I was to the point like, look, if I bought a 20 sack or a quarter ounce, it didn't matter. I wasn't stopping until it was gone. I wasn't sharing it. I wasn't giving you some or giving him some. I was taking it all. It was mine, and I was not closing my eyes until it was gone.
A selfish druggie.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. Absolutely. I'd have a whole crap ton of it, and then somebody come and be like, "Dude, do you have just one line?" I'm like, "Nah, sorry, man, I'm out.
Can't help you. Can't help you.
I'm out. I gotta go. Bye." Click, and then
Excuse
get
me.
back to my mountain.
Yep. Excuse me while I put my face in the bowl of one of the Scarface.
So you came to Reno.
I came to Reno on a whim. Like I said, I had enough money to buy a one-way ticket, and that's where I ended up. I got the plane with 78 cents in my pocket and said, I guess we'll see what happens.
So you threw a dart at him, Matt, basically.
Basically, essentially, yeah.
Interesting.
I said, fuck it. And so here I ended up. And part of the reason I think was because I knew that I was walking into nothing, and I knew that at least there were casinos open 24 hours a day, so I could at least stay in somewhere, if I needed to. It was kind of a, fucked up logic, but it was there.
It was your backup.
And
yeah.
so that's what I did, and I did that for as long as I could, and then I ended up at the shelter here in Reno, which is I don't recommend to anybody.
No, I know that there was an old shelter and a new shelter. The old shelter was called the Bug House. It had the VW spider bug that's black that is kind of prevalent around town, around Nevada. And then there's the new one. Was it?
I was at the new one, at the CARES campus down 4th Street. That's the first place I ended up as far as the shelter goes. And I stayed there off and on for several months. I'd go there for a little while, then I get high, and then I take off for a couple of days and come back and do this and do that. And then I got introduced to the WellCare system at some point in the game around Thanksgiving and I ended up at 4th Street, which is housing. And it was cool, except for the fact that for me it was not enough structure, it was not enough anything, because you pretty much had free reign. And so I stayed for a couple of days, I got, what I felt healthy, and then when I went out and bought dope, and once I bought dope, then I had this thing about guilt. So then I can't go back there because I'm high. So then I just go back to shelter and start all over again. And I did that probably 3 or 4 different times until Christmas of last year. I finally got to go to a 30-day program at Elko at Vitality. So I did that, and I was there for Christmas last year. And when I got out of there, I went into another program here in town, and that didn't last very long. I was exited from that program for some incidents that went down. And once I got exited from there, I was kind of stuck. And so I went back to the shelter one more time. And I got blessed when I walked into the overflow in that shelter. A buddy of mine that I got kicked out of the program with was there. And so he and I kind of went on a little run for a couple of days, about a month actually. But then I circled back and went back to the WellCare system again. I went back to 4th Street. And once again, not enough structure. I walked away from 4th Street, let it go for a couple more weeks, and then I went back and got into here.
You got into the house I have.
Correct. I arrived here. And it was very interesting, because when I arrived here, a partner of mine that I referred to, I was asking about him because he had been talking to WellCare as well. He ended up actually in the program as well, so he is now in the program with me, and so we're here together now, and that's kind of cool.
That is super cool. And here you've been under my nose this whole time, and I had absolutely no idea that story actually collaborates with this one.
Yeah.
That there is a past history.
Yeah.
And you guys are both seem to be doing great at it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the one thing, if I can say this, is I'm going to circle back to what I was going to say initially, was anybody that's on the fence about this whole recovery thing or going into rehabs, is if the first one don't work, try again. Because the program is not about the program. The programs are all the same. They kind of all regurgitate the same information. The program is more about the men that are in the program if you can find the right group, the right niche for yourself, that's kind of where you need to go, And I'm living breathing proof of that. I think I've tried many of these programs in the past, and this was the one that was able to stick.
May I ask how many around ballpark that you've tried? Just to kind of credit.
Between 3 states, probably a dozen.
Okay, so even though you'd been through that dozen, you still didn't give up, and you.
No, I still knew I needed to figure something out. I still knew something had to happen, something that needed to change, right? But like I said, the programs that I've been in before, for some reason or another, it just didn't stick.
But you never give up.
No.
And you eventually found one.
Yeah, exactly.
So this one works for you. So, when you got here originally, I know it's weird for everybody. I definitely wanted to know your perspective on how it was when you got here and what you've been doing since you've been here.
When I first got here, it was much different than it is now. I would say this program has evolved a couple times since I've been here. I've seen a staff. I was just speaking to staff about this earlier. Since I've arrived here, only 4 of the original staff members that I was with are still here. Case management all the way down has departed. There's a very high turnover in this industry.
There is.
So it's very challenging for an addict like myself, because I like consistency. And so when I keep seeing people leave, it's like, I'm on my 3rd case manager now, and it's like, it's just like, oh man. And so I was able to sit through all that and just kind of be uncomfortable. Like, I had a roommate leave on me and go out and relapse. And that kind of flipped me out a little bit, but that's the nature of the beast, I guess.
And I think that's a super important part of people to know that are getting into rehab, or people that are new to rehab, is that there are people that are going to leave. People are going to come, people are going to go, even staff, even the head of house. We've even had our second head of house now.
Yeah.
Even his boss, Shoes. I just call him Shoes, that drove the van everywhere.
No, I got you.
He's even left. We're actually without his boss right now. So there was something to know when you're prepping to come into rehab, is that it would be fair to say that
change is an absolute constant.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. And again, take it from somebody who like me, who likes consistency, who likes that regimen. That when that stuff starts changing, it will freak you out. It will be challenging. But sit through it. Sit through that discomfort, because it gets better on the other side.
Oh, absolutely. I believe it does. I'm behind you. I'm a month and a half behind you, but it does get better. You got bad days, and then you'll get good days. So what are your plans for the future, since you've been basically, one of the heads of the house?
I wouldn't consider myself one of the heads of the house. I've been here a minute, and so that allows me that time, but it also allows me that experience that I've seen good and bad, right? And so I also choose that. One of the things that I choose in this house is that I don't speak of the things that I see negative. I don't speak to those things in front of certain people. That's one of the issues that I have, is some people do that. They will speak out loud in front of people that probably don't need to hear that information. But what my plans are is I'm working on getting stable housing. I have become a sustainable, productive member of society again for the first time in many years. I've got a job.
Feels weird to say that, doesn't it?
It really does, actually. I gotta pay taxes this year. I gotta follow somebody else's schedule now. What is that about? But anyway, so yeah, the plan is, and I got lucky in the fact that I said that I lost one roommate to a relapse, but I gained another roommate who has actually been pretty solid, and he and I have got plans to move out together, because I'm hoping that will, not only are we good friends, but I'm hoping that will be some accountability going out the door. Because if there's another thing that I've experienced in this place, is that there's a lot of retreads. A lot of guys, it's easy to get out of here, but it's hard to stay out of here sometimes. So I don't want to be that one. You know what I mean? That's my goal, is to not be that guy that ends up coming back to the door again.
Though you like the black lanyard, you want it to be the last you ever received.
Correct.
You have your establishment. You're established as a productive member of society. You're moving into the future. Do you have an exit? Because when I became transitional, they wanted to make sure that I had an exit date, to a T.
Right. Which is also the reason that, again, that's the difference between you and I right now, is I'm not putting that teal lanyard around my neck, because in the last month I've come up with some challenges. So that's the other thing I'll say is, look, even though you're 11, 12 months into recovery, that doesn't mean that challenges don't come back up, that your past doesn't come back and bite you in the ass.
Problems don't go away.
Yeah, they don't. And now the difference is now that you're in this environment, you're kind of forced to face them. Because again, this is challenges that I would have at one point just shuffled to the side and go whatever.
When you do face them, you're not alone.
Correct, and that's the other thing. Within this environment, you have a supportive network to help you face those, and so I'm leaning hard into that right now, which again is not something I anticipated having to do, but I'm having to do that, and so I'm just leaning into it and letting it play its course, and not really in a rush. So, and they're not pushing me or putting me on a timeline and saying you have to be done by this date, and so that I feel a little bit unique in that aspect because I hear a lot around the house going, they're putting me on an exit date, and they haven't put me there yet. So I'm kind of holding out for that a little bit. I put myself on an exit date. I'd like to be out by the end of March, 1st of April. I'm still up in the air waiting to see how things are going to play out.
In closing, I guess if you had a message about your journey, maybe somebody out there is thinking about a regional change, somebody out there has given up hope, somebody out there who's been through 11 programs instead of 12, what advice would you offer anybody that you know 100%?
Don't stop. Don't quit. Don't leave before the miracle happens. It's just keep doing it. Because I mean, if it's in your mind, if it's in your heart that you want to find recovery and you want to find a new life, then it's available to you. But you have to do the footwork. You have to do the work, and you have to maintain it.
You have to definitely do the work. That's inevitable around here. Guys, that was my guest, Dave, senior member. Very well respected in the house. Dave, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, this is Dan Kovac from Rehab Talk Radio. Remind you that less is more. Stay pure, stay poor, and we'll see you tomorrow.